works. It
All
says,
right.
which platform, Facebook didn't like it, or what platform didn't like that?
I don't know because I stream to a bunch of different platforms, and so using Streamlabs, I just clicked the go live button, and then it sent me an error. It said one of the title contains banned words or something like that, and so it didn't tell me which one. It just said one of them it doesn't like, and so it could be TikTok,
Yeah. Oh, I
Twitter,
see.
Twitch, Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, one of those.
Well, we've gotten into a very sensitive culture, haven't we?
Yeah. But it's all about the algorithm. You gotta use the magic words and the magic thumbnails to get all the views.
Yeah. It's an art. It's really an art. And I don't know that I've mastered the social media art. I have some people helping me, but it's a challenge.
For sure. Like I struggle with it all the time, like trying to figure out what to make the algorithm work, like especially with these short things that they just started doing on YouTube. Like
Yeah.
they started promoting it and you get like paid extra money if you start doing shorts. They give you extra bonuses or whatever. But one of mine got like mini viraled, got shown on their shorts feed, got like 5,000 views an hour for a few hours. But half of them
Wow.
got disliked because they were all on the Christian. It showed to the Christian channels, which was hilarious.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I find that most of my commentary, the comments that, especially when it comes to the book and otherwise, is mostly from atheists who are very caustic about it. I know I was. So, but it's interesting. Every once in a while, like every 1 out of 4 are, um, pro God and like the arguments or otherwise. But a lot of it's just ad hominem attacks, and I expect that. But I love hearing flaws in my arguments, or at least what they perceive to be flaws, and that's great. I mean, that's the way we learn, right? Debate is a fantastic format. So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I do it too. I enjoy there's the quote from the Fundamentals of Chess, 1883. The only way to get smarter is by playing a smarter opponent.
yes, yes. I say that about tennis because I like to play tennis.
Yeah.
I say it about chess because I love chess.
Oh yeah, we should totally play sometime. Well,
Oh, that'd be great.
What are
That'd be
you
great.
rated? I'm rated about 1900 to 2000.
Oh, I'm not rated. I mean, I haven't sought to get rated either, but I'm good. You know, among the people I play, I would say I beat 8 out of 10 of them. So, but
Nice.
I don't have time to devote that kind of attention. But I do it with my kids, and my kids are really good at chess now, and it's fun. And I don't know if you have kids, Tom.
No, I do not. I am
Yeah.
still a bachelor for the time being.
All right, well, maybe one day.
Yep.
But it's a. I will ask you though. At some point, why, as an atheist, you might have kids at all. I had an interesting conversation, and it's a chapter in my book. Um, this is my second book about why have kids. I mean, I just don't understand it. My brother's an atheist. He had 2 kids, and I asked him, "Why did you have kids?" And he said, uh, "To pass on my values," but more like a question. I don't think he thought about it. So it's daunting. I mean, having a kid is not just expensive, which goes without saying, but it is challenging. And talk about a risk and reward analysis. It's it's daunting. So maybe I'll ask you about that when we're on the show.
Sure. So yeah, we can jump right in. It looks like we are live. The
More of
chat
a
is
question.
working and
Okay.
everything, so we
Great.
are ready to go. Barak, thanks for coming on, and we appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your channel before we get started?
Oh, sure. I appreciate that. Well, my name is Barak Lurie. I have a channel, The Barak Lurie Show. We do talk about the aspects of God that are very helpful for society, but even more importantly, that atheism is a destructive force, and to be careful about it. While I think so many atheists like yourself, Tom, are very thoughtful about it, they want a better world and such like that. The problem with atheism, this is the theme of our show, is that it doesn't take into account the necessities of civilization and the realities of civilization. So that's the main focus of the YouTube channel. For my background, I was an atheist myself until about 22. I went to Stanford, and I did a thesis there for a humanities honors project. And I had noticed that Voltaire and Dostoevsky had both said the same thing, which is that if there were no God, it would be necessary to invent him. So I went about understanding why that was so, and why that line of more people had been killed in the name of God than anything else. And I set out to prove that. I thought, okay, I'll do my thesis on that. And I want to show how destructive God is, and the notion of religion, organized especially, has been so destructive. And in the process, I learned I was wrong. And I completely flipped on the thesis, and ultimately realized that it is the lack of religion that has caused far more damage than the presence of religion. Indeed, I would say that I would not want to have anything to do with religion were it to be proven to me that religion has caused more deaths and destruction than the lack of religion. So that's where I came out. Now, I came out from that moment where I discovered that I actually believed in God. Free will was the main reason why I came to God. And I remember coming to these Christian Bible thumpers that I'd always been debating with, very, very politely, by the way. And I came to them and I said, I think I believe in God. And Tom, I got to tell you, I felt so embarrassed. I felt embarrassed to myself. I said, you're an idiot for thinking that God is real. But I could not escape the conclusion that there almost certainly was a God. And I remember that. And then I was curious, Tom, why is it that I felt that this was an embarrassment to me? Why was I kicking and screaming? Shouldn't I come to my conclusions? And we can talk about that later. Of course, we will. But nevertheless, I came to that conclusion. Why was I feeling so embarrassed about it? Why was I so reluctant to accept it? And I realized that the reason why was that I understood that with God came accountability, a lot of accountability. And I didn't want it. I didn't want that responsibility. I didn't want that accountability, but it was there. I just had to do it. So that's a lot of my background there. And since then, I became more of an advocate. Eventually, I started speaking on lectures and otherwise. I wrote a book about it called Atheism Kills, and that came out in 2017. And it did very well. I was very pleasantly surprised. And I've been on the speaker circuit since then. It's not a full-time gig for me, but I do enjoy talking about it. And I love the banter, and I love talking to atheists because, first of all, I respect them. And I respect you, Tom. I've seen your videos, and I think they're very thorough, and they make you think, which I appreciate. And I always want to see, like, what am I missing? I'm happy to do the debate. I want to know the arguments. And hopefully people want to hear the arguments on the other side. I think you're like that, Tom. So I appreciate that. Anyway, that's my background. Free will was the main source of discussion for me. That opened the door, as it were, and led me to many other things. But free will, I could not. I took so many philosophy classes, and at the end of the day, the conclusion was that free will just has to come from a creator. And who knows whether that's the creator of the God of the Bible, but from a creator that gives you free will. And there are many that people just don't believe in free will, like Sam Harris, for example. He'll deny that there's a free will. And I understand it. He's being intellectually honest. I do appreciate that. But to me, I think free will is apparent, and that's something that's very hard to prove. But all the same, I think free will is real. So that opened the door for me, and that then led me to the discussions about evolution. I discovered that the discussion of evolution is a fairly binary concept. Either it happened, everything that we see in our lives, life and the development of life, and then intelligent life, of course, either happened totally randomly through natural forces, or it happened through the process of a creator who was involved. I tend now to believe in the latter. I think the conclusions and the probabilities are more strong there, and that's why I land where I land. So I hope that's enough.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. That's a good introduction. So I am an atheist, by which I mean I believe that atheism best explains everything about the world. And I think that all the arguments and evidence are best explained by a naturalistic world without a creator mind behind everything. So, like to talk about free will, I also don't believe in free will. I think that free will is logically impossible. I don't think that there can be free will. I think that everything we do, every action we take, is either going to be done for reasons, in which case it's going to be determined by those reasons, or it's going to be done for no reason, in case it's going to be random by definition. And I don't think there is a way out of that dichotomy. I don't think free will can exist because any decision you make, there's no extra force there for you to be able to make a choice outside of predetermined reasons or just fundamental randomness. So there's no way to actually get free will, as far as I know.
Right. That's the way I felt as well, and I felt very strongly in the same way. And then I felt very differently. I felt that there is free will. I had a good atheist friend of mine, and we're still very good friends today. And I remember talking on this very issue, and I said to him, "I'm going to start beating the crap out of you right now." Okay. And he says, "Why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, because I don't have free will. I'm gonna beat the crap out of you. And I expect, because it's all deterministic, that you can't be upset with me." "Well, I will be upset with you," he said. And I said, "But you shouldn't be. I mean, I've been determined, as it were, to beat the crap out of you." So that was a simple thought experiment to go through. And his response that he'd be upset was a legitimate response. I mean, we have to be held accountable for our choices. And that's why I think that free will is a reality. We could talk about that all day long, but I don't think either one of us will be able to prove that there is no free will or that there is free will. I think we have to just experience it. It's hard for me to believe that there's no free will. I think there is. And I think a lot of our foundation of society has been built upon free will.
Well, that's an intuition you have, but I don't think that's evidence that there is such a thing. Like saying that you can be angry at somebody. Well, yeah, I mean, I would be too, but that's not evidence of free will. So, like,
oh, I agree with you.
There are people who are like, there was this one case of an elephant who went on a rampage. I think it was in America somewhere. No, maybe it was in the Philippines. And they were angry at the elephant, and they strung up the elephant and whipped it and tortured it before killing it, because it went on a rampage and killed a lot of people. People are angry at lots of things. You can be angry at rocks. You can be angry at fictional characters. Our ability to feel angry at something wouldn't be evidence of free will. And so I don't see that as a way to justify a belief in free will. I think that in order to justify a belief in free will, you would first have to explain what it is. You'd have to give a coherent definition of what it could possibly be. Because my fundamental problem with it is that when you say you believe there is free will, well, first you'd have to say, how is it even possible for it to exist? Not just to say, well, I believe it exists. Like, I can believe unicorns exist, or I can believe a square circle exists. But until you can give a coherent definition of how it could possibly exist, I don't think it's a reasonable position to take.
Well, we have to disagree on this. I think that free will is very abundantly clear, just like the fact that love is clear, the fact that beauty is clear, the fact that we appreciate music in the way we do. These are things that you can't necessarily define in the same way. I mean, I think they're equally undefinable, but they exist. So I demur to your notion that we have to have a definition of it. Free will is, to my mind, the fact that we are responsible for our actions, that we make independent actions based upon our consciousness, and we are held accountable for those actions. If we don't have free will, then there's no need for accountability. I just think that there's just none. But we live in a world of accountability. We do expect to punish perpetrators of crime, for example. Somebody who murders somebody, somebody who kills somebody, who steals from somebody who embezzles, somebody who rapes. These people need to go to jail. Partly not just to deter them from future conduct, but also to punish them for their choices. I think society understands that there's free will, whether we like it or not.
Somebody's in the chat. They're saying there's an echo. I think like your mic is picking up my words from itself, so they can hear
Oh no.
a slight
Okay.
echo. Do you happen to have headphones or anything like this, or can you just turn the volume down a little bit on your
Yeah,
end?
sure. Let me see if I can do that. All right, let's try that.
All right, I'll test it and speak and see if we can hear myself in the background. I'm just saying.
Okay, well, now I can't hear you too well, so I'm going to get a little louder here. All right, let's try that.
All right, testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I don't hear an echo on my end, so I think that solved it as long as you can hear on your end.
Right, I'll just get a little closer then.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I think there are coherent definitions for things like love and beauty. Like beauty is our feeling that certain things are more aesthetically pleasing to others, and love is a emotion that we feel an attachment to other human beings. So I definitely think those are coherent things we can define.
Mhm.
But I think I definitely see a difference there between that and free will. Like, I agree people should go to prison if they've committed crimes, but I obviously don't
Why?
think
Why? I don't get it.
a
I
preventative.
mean,
So
other than to make sure that they don't do to other people, why would you send them to prison if they're not accountable?
yeah,
They don't have the free will for what they've done.
yeah, it's preventative. So we put them in prison to prevent them from harming other people. It's like Sam Harris uses this great example of a guy who had a brain tumor, and the brain tumor made him have like pedophilic desires. And as soon as they removed the brain tumor, they were gone. He wasn't a pedophile anymore. And then the brain tumor came back, and he got the desires again. They removed the brain tumor, was gone. There was no reason to put him in
That doesn't
prison.
erase free will. That doesn't erase free will at all. I mean, look, some people
Erase.
have a predisposition to alcohol. That doesn't mean that they should go ahead and drive drunk, right? I mean, that they have somehow get free pass to drive drunk. We still hold them accountable. I'm not interested in alcohol at all. I don't think I've ever been drunk in my life. I drink once in a blue moon, maybe a glass of wine per month. But that doesn't mean that I'm saving society by not driving drunk. And that's the answer to that question. The fact is, people are responsible for their actions, and I hold accountable
Well, that wasn't
anybody
that wasn't
who
exactly
has
the question.
a predisposition to alcohol.
So
And
the point I was leading to is that once we remove the brain tumor, there's no reason to put him in prison. It's completely irrelevant because the cause of the crime was the brain tumor, not the person. So even if there was free will, that free will can be overridden or controlled by the physical stuff in your brain. And so if there's a way
well,
to cure the thing that caused the crime by changing the physical structure of the brain, then there's no reason to put them in prison anymore. They've done nothing wrong. It's not their fault. They were determined to do this, like as you said, by their biological state. And so the only reason to put someone in prison is if their natural brain state causes them to be more inclined to cause harm to others. And so we have to do that until we can cure them. And if we can cure them, we can just let them go. We would just all crime, all prisons would be gone because we could just
yeah,
cure
I
all
don't buy
crime.
that, Tom. I think that doesn't make sense to me. So let's take your example of the brain tumor. Putting aside the fact that that is an extremely rare situation where something would cause somebody to be more predisposed to pedophilia, which is just, I mean, I take that as almost as a thought as an experiment, but let's say that that's the case. So what? So he's now been predisposed to this thing. He still is responsible for his actions. And to say that I can't help it, I must, engage in pedophilia because this brain tumor is more or less telling me to do so. That's not. That doesn't mean that he's less accountable. He's still accountable for his actions. There are many times that somebody may have harmed us, may have hurt us, may have done something horrible to our daughters and sons, and we want to beat the crap out of them, if not kill them ourselves. I mean, there are reasons why people may choose to do some horrific crimes and feel justified in doing so. I mean, I can tell you, if somebody ever tried to do anything to my kids, I might very well beat the crap out of them, if not kill them too. But I still am held accountable for my actions, and it is still a matter of choice. So I do everything else within the confines of the law, but there are all sorts of reasons why people do what they do, and we still hold them accountable. Free will is real.
Well, I mean, you keep saying that, but if we can show that the reason that they made the choice or didn't make the choice was because a part of their brain was damaged, like Phineas Gage, the famous railroad worker who had
Yeah,
a
yeah,
iron spike shot through his head.
right,
It went through a part of his brain that's controlled impulse control. So he lost the ability to stop himself from making decisions. He would do them. He had no choice. He was unable to make the
right,
choice to stop. And so if
right.
we can show that you don't have a choice, that this is literally just the biology in your brain, then you aren't responsible. And once we can cure that, it seems morally wrong to put you in prison. Like, obviously, this was the fault of something in your brain. If we can cure you of that and you'll no longer do it, then we shouldn't put you in prison because you weren't at
I'm all
fault.
for curing people who have that sort of situation, of course, but I do think you're arguing at the margin here. And the fact that somebody might have had impact upon his ability to make any choices at all, okay, yeah, then I guess you can argue he has no free will if he has no ability to make any choices. But that is truly an argument at the margin. And we're speaking about the 99.99% of people who do have the ability to make choices. And
Well,
for
why do
them,
you think that's the margin? Because this is all brains. This is how all brains work.
I agree that all brains work with the ability to make choices. I mean, if that's what you're saying, then we totally agree. But you're talking about the Phineas character who had a horrific accident that literally pierced through his ability to make choices. I mean, that's the way you describe it, at least. And I recall that from psychology class. But the fact is that he didn't have any ability to make choices. So you might as well say that somebody couldn't drive because he didn't have his legs anymore. Okay, yeah, but that's doesn't help the discussion. The point is that most people do have legs, and they can drive, and they need to get from point A to point B. So I don't buy it. I just don't. I think free will experientially and the way we actually live our lives and what we expect of other people is that they are responsible for their actions. And because of that, I accept the notion of free will. And I think it's quite real.
Well, the reason I brought up those cases was because the consensus in neurology and every cognitive science is that
Mhm.
your actions are determined by the physical structure of your brain, all brains, every brain, everywhere, all choices. And so obviously some people have desires and they don't act upon those desires because that part of their brain works just fine and they can override those desires, which is not
Right.
choice. It's just a determined feature of their brain. And some people don't. And so they do succumb to those desires because it's a determined feature of their brain, or they're starving to death or something. And so other parts of their brain override those restrictions. And so it seems like every brain is designed in the exact same way physically. And so the limitations of what a person is able to choose or not able to choose is determined by the physical structure of their brain. And so if we could control that and change the physical structure of the brain so they no longer act on those impulses, and we could
Right.
just cure every prisoner of this so they all have the ability to stop,
You,
then there would be no prison anymore. There's no reason to put them in prison because this was not their fault from the free will standpoint. It was just
right.
a
You
biological
do
feature.
you understand that first of all that the notion that you can kind of fix this either medically or some sort of altering of the brain one way or the other. This is an argument that was used in eugenics and was highly disfavored ultimately in the 1970s. And you could use that argument. You could say, look, everyone's got this issue. But I'll tell you, Tom, you and I, so sorry about my cough here. You and I have predispositions for this or that. Some people might have a predisposition toward alcohol, toward gambling, toward sex, toward drugs, toward work, toward laziness, toward whatever. And we are expected to fight ourselves. I mean, it's one of the greatest battles that we have. And we say in the Bible that the biggest fight you have is with yourself. And that is truly your greatest battle. So it's nice to be able to think that we can look into the brain and just kind of tweak this or that, and everything will be great. And it's just a question of science eventually solving this problem. But I don't know that I buy that. It's just not experiential for me. It's just you might as well tell me that you're wearing a purple sweatshirt right now. It could be. I don't think you are. My experience and my understanding of color is that you are wearing a grayish type sweatshirt, and I demur to your notion that there is no free will. I think we are responsible for our actions. We do expect other people to be responsible for our actions, and our civilization, in many ways, is built upon the notion of accountability and being responsible for our actions. The notion of good and evil. There is no good and evil if there's no free will. I mean, I'm sure you would agree with that.
No.
You don't agree with that?
Yeah, I believe I'm a moral realist. Most philosophers are moral realists, which means there are true moral statements.
Okay, so wait a minute. If there's no free will, then why would you why would you call somebody good or bad for that matter? I don't get that.
Because it's a description of how their interactions with others, regardless of whether or not they have free will. Like free will is irrelevant. Like you don't need it. Why would you need it?
A description of being good, that's a relative term. What is good then?
Right. So good.
Bad, right? I mean, we can. It's not. I'm not even going to say that we're playing that game. I'm just saying you would be unable, philosophically or realistically or logically, to define something as good or bad if there's no free will. If people are not accountable for their actions and they're simply acting because of the neurons in their brain and the structure of their brain, then there truly is no good or bad.
Well, no, like
I'm actually surprised, Tom, that you said that there's such a thing.
Yeah,
as good and bad.
pretty much every philosopher would say you're wrong on that one. Just like I think goodness is any, like immorality is an involuntary imposition of will, and morality would be a voluntary assistance of will kind of a thing. I don't think nowhere in there do you need free will. Like most philosophers say you don't need free will. Like Platonic objects, you don't need free will. Law of nature, you don't need free will. None of them you need free will.
Law of nature, you're right. There's no free will in the law of nature. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with you that if you believe in pure random evolution, there's no free will there either. But there is no good and evil there either.
No, again, that's wrong. If you just disagreeing with the entire field of philosophy. So every philosopher.
No, I don't think you're right about this, Tom.
So it's the Phil Survey's paper. Phil Survey's paper, the largest poll of philosophers. You can go to it and look at moral realism. The vast majority, or not the vast majority, the majority of philosophers are moral realists, and like 70% are atheists. 70% of philosophers are atheists, and like 60 are moral realists.
I think this is the problem with atheism in that regard, because to the extent, and that was the magic phrase that you just used, to say that 70% of these moral philosophers are atheists, I think they're struggling with how to reconcile, on the one hand, not having any God in their lives or rejecting the notion of a creator, and at the same time want to portray themselves as wanting morality. I don't understand that. Morality is something that is given through in my mind, one God, one creator. The notion of morality has to come from that. It's not from logic. Logic, you can play that game where I can make any decision seem moral. I can. So it's not impressive to me that 70% of these atheist philosophers, or that these philosophers you're talking about, are atheists. It means nothing to me.
Well, I think
it just means they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Well, I think the key phrase there is that you don't understand it. Like I can understand that you don't understand it, and from your perspective, it doesn't make sense. But from the perspective of the experts who have been trained in the field and who are experts in the field of ethics and morality, it makes perfect sense, because your definition of morality is just wrong. That would be.
Why are you referring to all these other philosophers? Why don't you speak for yourself? I want to understand it. You're simply third-partying it to a bunch of philosophers who say X. I don't think you're right about that. And the fact that an atheist philosopher is going to talk about morality, that doesn't mean anything to me, because I do not think, I've never heard an atheist philosopher be able to fit that square peg in a round hole. There is no morality if there is no God. There are preferences, yes. There are things that you'd rather not happen. You'd rather not be killed. You'd rather not be stolen from. You'd rather not be raped. I get that. But morality, the notion that there is one true sense of what is right and wrong, that's not consistent with atheism.
Well, you say that again, but this is the reason I'm bringing up the other philosophers, is because there's actual data that shows that most philosophers, most professionals in the field who have spent years studying this say that's wrong. And we can prove that the vast majority of philosophers say that's wrong. And the reason they say that's wrong is because our understanding of morality is demonstrably different from what you just said. So like the model of morality you presented, the divine command theory, where God says so, therefore it's moral, is one of the worst models of morality. It fails compared to all of the others by a vast margin. So it's like when we're comparing models of morality, what we're looking for is a description of the most moral world, essentially, the best world that could possibly exist. And when you base morality in a God, it becomes arbitrary. It's only good because God said so. If God changed his mind, would it still be good? Yes. And so now there is no such thing as a moral action. There's no such thing as this action is the moral action. It's this action is just what God happens to say at this point in time, and he may change his mind in the future. So morality becomes arbitrary.
Okay, so Tom, there's a lot to unpack there, but
Sure.
I'll start off from that notion that God would change his mind. God hasn't changed his mind in terms of that. So I'm not even, I don't want to get into biblical stuff because I think there's a very big distinction, which I'd like to
Sorry,
explore.
sorry to interrupt. The point
Yeah.
there wasn't that God did change his mind. The point here is that the
God
truth
could change
maker, the truth maker of what makes something moral is God's decision. If it's the case that the truth maker that makes something moral is God's decision, then if he were to change his mind, we're not saying he did, it doesn't make a difference if he does to the argument. If he changed his mind, then what morality would be would also change because it's determined by his state of mind. So it doesn't
Okay,
matter
so
if he
yeah,
actually changes his mind. The point here is that morality is subjective because it's contingent on a mind. For it to be
it's a
objective,
distinction. To my mind, it's a distinction without significance, Tom. Because on the one hand, for example, I mean, I can point to you. It's kind of easy to during the Nazi regime, what they decided about killing Jews and other alleged undesirables was that they want to get rid of them. It was logical. It was moral. They believed it was moral, and I'm putting that in air quotes. In many parts of the world, even today, but especially in the past, it was acceptable to rape little boys and to have them as concubines.
yeah,
That
that would
was
be
part of their
subjective,
society. And
right? Because
hold just a second. You're talking about floating point morality and floating point logic, for that matter. What is good for today changes tomorrow. And I go through this. I call it the logic game in my book, Atheism Kills, because there are many easy ways to logic your way out of what is moral and claim that to be moral instead. So the question is to you, back, you're talking about how what's good for today is it could change tomorrow because can change his mind, could change his mind, to use your phrase. You could say the same thing about anything in society, about how people change their decisions based upon the circumstances of the time.
yeah, I agree. Because those are both subjective moralities. So neither of those would count as subjective morality.
Slavery is a good example. That was very logical in the minds of a lot of slaveholders back in the early
Yeah.
days of America.
Yeah.
And of course, before then, throughout the entire history of the world. And here we are. It's different, right? But slavery is always wrong in the eyes of God. Always.
So, I mean, I agree with you. I think that simply being able to change your mind in a social setting makes a morality subjective. So it would not be an objective morality. It would be a subjective morality for the same reason a God-based morality would be a subjective morality. Anything that's based off of a mind or opinions would be subjective morality. And so philosophers say that moral realists say that morality is something outside of people. There's no opinions. No opinion can change it. God's opinion can't change it. My opinion can't change it. It's something outside of all people. That's what makes it objective.
Right.
So I mean, I agree with you. I don't think morality is determined by society. I don't think that any logical arguments change morality in any way. I think morality is an objective thing in nature that exists independent of humans and God and minds. So,
Well, I mean, you talk about in nature, and I appreciate what you're saying, Tom. But I mean, going back to nature, using your very word, nature has a very different set of morality, doesn't it? I mean, if you
no.
can kill or be killed in nature, and that's okay. The lion who kills the master lion or the alpha lion, as it were, is not going to be jailed for doing so. On the contrary, he's going to be lauded and he's going to be respected as the new alpha lion, right? Same thing with stealing food in the natural world.
What does that
Evil.
have to do with morality? Like,
What's that?
it seems like you're saying that anything that occurs in nature is nature's morality, and that is not the case.
No, I didn't say that. I
Well,
said
yeah,
that there's
it seems like so. You're bringing
okay.
up examples in nature that are immoral. I count these as immoral actions, and you're saying that this is nature's morality, which no, the fact that
No. I guess I misspoke. If that's the case, because I certainly didn't intend that. I don't think there is morality in nature. I think you were right the first time when you said that there is no good or evil in nature, or at least one of us said it. I don't think there's good or evil in nature. I don't think there's morality in nature along the animal kingdom, at least. You don't expect a tree to be responsible for falling on another tree and so on. we do have a completely different set of rules. Forgive me. Completely different set of rules when it comes to the way humans interact with each other. It's totally different than the animal kingdom. We don't expect people to rape. We don't expect people to steal. We don't expect people to lie, for that matter, and to murder. There are a lot of things that and then beyond that natural state, we also have all sorts of other regulatory requirements and insider trading issues and so forth, right? That they're beyond the natural law. We make a tremendous amount of laws that all turn on this notion of morality.
So in my view, there is good and evil in nature. I think that when we're trying to describe what the best of all possible worlds would be, the most moral world, it would have a world with no rape, including animal rape, no killing, including animal killing. We would solve all of those things too. Like if we're trying to make a perfectly moral world, we would kind of like Star Trek, where you could like generate meats and not have to kill things. We'd give all the animals the meat they need to survive without ever having them kill one another. And that would be a
Well,
more
you sound like Revelations, where the lamb will lie down with the lion and so forth. I mean, that we know that that's never going to happen. We know that in nature, the things you were just talking about, that there won't be any rape in nature. Of course, there's going to be rape in nature. Of course, there's going to be slaughter in nature. Of course, there's going to be stealing in nature. It'll always be so, and always has been so.
Well,
So
no,
I don't
we do
understand that.
have lambs lying with lions. That's a thing. We can train them. Like if as long as you provide enough sufficient food for animals, they don't. There's a significantly less likelihood that they actually eat other animals. You can domesticate them, and if that happened for many many years, evolutionarily they would stop selecting for aggressive tendencies and they would stop doing that. And so what you said there is kind of just obviously wrong. We could obviously end all death and murder and rape everywhere if we had enough control over physics. Like obviously we could just put everything in a zoo in its own little cage and or
Right.
big cage, give everything its own planet if we had enough control over physics. Like if we had God's power, we could do this in a second. We could just snap our
Right.
fingers,
Well,
poof.
then we would have no free will, then, would we? I mean, if we put everyone in
Why?
cages and every animals, right? So, but
Wait,
look, going to
wait,
your
wait,
point
what
about
do you
the
mean?
lion,
I want to ask about that. You said if
yeah.
we put everyone in cages, they wouldn't have free will. Like, can you fly? Could you just jump up and fly right now?
Okay, so of course I can't. The point
Well,
is
do you
that
still have
what
free
you said
will?
about what you said about the cages is you seem to respect the fact that if we put people in cages and kept them separate, not just people but animals too, then the lion would never be able to eat the lamb, and that's a fair statement. I think you're 100% right. In fact, that's what zoos do, right? They do keep animals in cages exactly for that reason, and also to protect them, protect people who are visiting from the very dangerous lions and otherwise. So you have you're actually making my point for me, which is that these animals would make choices that are against what we want. What you're proposing is to limit them, to limit their nature, as it were. So, and more to
What?
the point about lions, for example, you think you can train them, and then they won't attack. Well, then, what's that group from Las Vegas, right? The circus guys. I mean, they had that lion, and he was training.
Roy, something and Roy.
That's right, Roy something, right? And that line that didn't act consistent with what you're saying. There is a nature to certain kinds of animals that are not domesticable. Even my dogs, I have two dogs, and they're very gentle, but you their tendency, they're very sharp teeth, and they will be very violent if push comes to shove.
Well, so there's two
So
things that I wanted to ask about. One, do you think it's possible that if we have enough scientific control over physics, we will be able to stop all animals from killing any other animals?
no, I think that you would have to do such incredible contortions of nature in order to prevent the natural cycle of the animal kingdom and the circle of life, to quote the Lion King, of course. That's what you would have to do. I mean, it's just you would have to have cages throughout the entire world. I don't think that you could possibly do that. Not realistic.
You don't think that if we had enough control over physics, like could colonize multiple planets, could build things like Star Trek, we could also do this. Like it's logically possible we could do this, right?
Uh, Logically possible.
Yeah.
I suppose. Look, as we say in law, anything is possible, right? I mean, it's possible that what's her name, Nicole Simpson, and that waiter that she was with, that they accidentally fell on the knives and had their heads sliced off. But not likely, but it's possible, right? So you're
Sure.
talking, you're proposing a proposition that maybe you're getting to a certain point. I don't understand it, but nevertheless, you're proposing a proposition that we could control the physical world in such a way that, with different planets and everything and colonizing them. Okay, anything's possible.
Well, this doesn't seem to be like something that's implausible. This seems like necessarily, if technology continues to increase in the way it's increasing, like in 1,000 years, we will have necessarily the ability to do this. Like, obviously.
I think that's a question of your faith in technology and science. It's interesting what people think science will do in the future and what it actually does ultimately are very different things. I've noticed that. You've noticed that. So I don't know. I just don't see a world where 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now, we'll have that ability to control in such a way that will alter the very nature of nature, whether in the animal kingdom or in humankind. I don't see it.
Well, I mean, that's another interesting topic. Like we can already put computer chips into brains and control feelings and things, and we could just if we had enough technology, we could literally do this for every animal.
Goes to the issue. Look, I agree with you, and I think we'll see a lot of this biotech technology where there will be chips involved, and humans will have part of their brains or otherwise functioned by technology. Okay, yeah, I agree with that.
Well, yeah, my only point here is that it seems like it's pretty easy to imagine a world where we could stop all murder by doing that, by creating cages, by building force fields, by doing all kinds of things. There's lots of different technological ways that we humans will have in the future that we already have the basis for today, that we could do this ourselves. I mean, it was just very strange for me because you said it would be impossible to do this. Like, this seems like very possible.
I mean, it's wildly improbable and wildly implausible. But look, I agree with you. I mean, technically speaking, we could do that. But do we want to live in that kind of world? Because ultimately, if we're going to change our very nature, what do we lose in the process if we don't have? I mean, this is from Alex in A Clockwork Orange, right? I mean, part of the issue of that is that they took away his free will. That's what that movie's all about. And his natural predisposition was to go wilding, as it were. But yeah, they were doing exactly what you're proposing, Tom. They were, putting up the toothpicks in his eyes and otherwise nauseating him whenever they played Beethoven's Fifth music. And that was the way that they were going to control him. Is that the way we want to live? I propose to you that we don't want to.
Right. That brings me back to my other point, is that we can do all of this and still have this free will thing that you're talking about. Like, we could still have a world with no murder, no rape, and still have free will. Because, well, that was what my question was before. Can you fly? Can you go outside and fly right now? Like, obviously not. But do you still have free will?
Of course I do.
So you can have limitations that don't stop you from having free will. So we could just add...
Limitations and choices are two very different things.
Right.
I would like to be an NBA basketball player, but it ain't going to happen.
Right.
So, I mean, that's pretty sensible, right?
Yes.
I think it makes a lot of sense. But Tom, I
was going somewhere with this. So
okay.
You can add an extra limitation that you can't kill people. So just like you can't fly, you can't kill people, and you still have free will. So you still have all the desires, you still have all the motivations. But if you physically are unable to do so, the world is now a better place. But you still have free will. So we could do the same thing. That was my cages example. We could put everyone in their own little cage, essentially.
Right.
And stop all murder, and everyone would still have free will. This is a very extreme example. We wouldn't need to put everyone in cages, but we could make it physically impossible for one person to kill or force another person to do anything they don't consent to, just like they can't fly. So it's like add a law of physics, essentially, that you can't force people to do things they don't consent to. And we now have a significantly more moral world with the free will thing, if you believe in it, equally as free.
Okay, so morality, I think I beg to differ, Tom, because if you make it so that nobody can, let's just go through the primary things of the Ten Commandments. Like, nobody can kill, nobody can commit adultery for that matter, nobody can steal, nobody can even covet.
Coveting. So this is only physical limitations. Remember, so you can still have all the desires.
It doesn't matter. I'm just playing the role here. So nobody can steal, nobody can rape, nobody can murder, and that's the Ten Commandments. Within the Ten Commandments. Okay, well then they're not really observing the Ten Commandments one way or the other. It's not
Sure.
a free will situation. It's just like Alex and the Clockwork Orange. I think that you're taking away his free will. Now, you don't believe in free will. I do. And I think that we are necessarily responsible for our actions.
But wait,
So
wait, wait. You said you can't fly, but you still have free will. So if they can't
yes,
murder, they would still have free will in the same way, right? You would still have free will in this argument.
if you take away his ability to commit murder, his ability to steal, his ability to rape, okay, we'll use all those things, okay?
Yep.
Then yes, I suppose he has free will with respect to other things, like he has free will to not yell, free will to not swear, free will to not covet, free will to not commit adultery, I suppose. But he'd have different free will in different areas. But in the meantime, in your thought experiment, you'd be basically clamping him, I guess handcuffing him to do other things.
Uh,
But that's not what
I'm
free will is all about.
I'm slightly confused. So when I think of free will, I think of the will to desire. If you have the ability to desire it, you have free will, regardless of whether or not you have the ability to act on it. So like, I
No,
have the free will to want to fly, but I can't fly.
no,
So I
that's that. You've defined it, and then you've kind of gone off with it. But it's not the way I would define it. It's not
okay.
about the free will to express your desire. I think it's a choice. There are many times I don't want to do something and I choose to do it. I choose, for example, not to pounce on that beautiful woman. I may desire to do so, but I choose not to. So that's different, right? I mean, that runs counter exactly to what you said.
Sort of, maybe. So like, yeah, from my understanding of the definition of free will, normally it's the desire. So like, if you look at a woman with lust in your eyes, you have sinned in the eyes of God, or whatever, I forget the quote is. But if you desire to do it, even if you physically aren't able, that would still be a sin, I think, right, in God's eyes.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up because this is a very big distinction between Christians on the one hand and Jews on the other. Something that I've discovered only about 7 years ago. So the Jewish answer to that, and I'm a Jew, the Jewish answer to that is you are free in your mind. You are not committing a sin by lusting after a woman, by wanting to beat the crap out of that man because he said something mean to you, or even wanting to kill that guy. There's no sin involved in that. In the Christian mindset, the answer is yes, you are sinning by thinking of it. And depending on which branch of Christianity you're talking about, it is as sinful as the actual act itself. I never understood that, Tom, myself. I think that there's a huge difference between wanting to have that woman and be lustful about her and actually raping her. I think there's a huge difference. Not the least of which is that she doesn't even know necessarily that you're lusting after her, and she doesn't have the impact of being a victim. But that's neither here nor there.
Oh yeah,
So,
thanks for the
as I think that's
clarification. So yeah, I
I
presumed
hope
the
that
wrong
answers
definition of free
as
will.
well.
So okay.
What's that?
I was under the impression you were using the other definition of free will. So thank you for the clarification.
Okay, you bet.
So yeah, I would say that if we can stop the physical actions, I think that is a more moral world. And so if having free will entails your ability to actually do these things, to impose on others without their consent, I would say that is objectively a more immoral universe, and that anyone who created such a universe would necessarily be immoral. Like for if a God chose to create this universe rather than the one that I'm describing, where it's impossible to force someone to do something they don't consent to, then that God would be evil. He would be necessarily an immoral being. And so the only moral option would be the one I've described, where in the world it's physically impossible to force anyone to do anything they do not consent to doing. That is the only objectively moral option for any.
I don't think there's any morality with what you just said. I think you're just imposing physicality upon and confining limitations upon people so that they don't do these undesirable acts. Morality is not. I don't think that's the proper word here to create a more moral world. You want to create a world where there is no such crime, no such horrific behavior. I get that,
Would you
but
not
then
call that a more moral world? So there's
no,
less
you're
immoral
just
actions.
no. Morality and free will go hand in hand. I do not see how you can separate the two. You are not to be applauded simply for not doing something that you can't do in the first place. Okay,
So if
I can't if I don't explode and become a nuclear explosion right now, this second. I'm not going to be applauded for that. I mean, there's no choice involved in that because I'm not a nuclear facility that can explode. So I can be applauded for not doing certain things that I otherwise might be inclined to do. So we applaud people for restraining themselves, for example, from horrific acts. We applaud people for throwing themselves into the breach of danger as well. We expect people to exercise their free will and hopefully in the right direction. That is what morality is.
so if we have one universe like the one we live in with lots of murder and rape and all that stuff, and then one universe with everything else without all of the murder and rape stuff, so it has less immoral actions, do you think it would be inaccurate to call it more moral if it has less immoral actions?
Say the last part again, because I want to make sure that I'm not stepping into a double negative here. So go ahead.
Yeah, so it's reasonable to say a universe without murder and rape, with everything else being equal, is more moral because it has less immoral actions.
No, I see what you're saying, and I disagree. It's not fair to say that. A more moral world is one that understands what it can do and yet restrains itself in the process. So you might as well say that the planet Venus, which has no life on it, is a more moral world than Earth because there are only rocks and such, and there is no murder, no rape, no kill, no stealing on Venus. So therefore, it's a more moral world. No, I think you're wrong.
Well, I said
moral is based upon just a second, if I could. More moral is based upon what people can do and their ability to achieve great things and such, and how they restrain themselves. That's a moral world, but it's a non sequitur to say to live in another universe. I say don't even go there. Just go to a different planet like Jupiter or Venus or Mars, where there is no life and there is no theft, rape, or stealing. So.
Well, that's why I said all else being equal. So it means you can't go. It has to have everything else Earth has without just this one thing. So without murder, without rape, those are the only things you can change. And so this is where I think that the fundamental disagreement between the philosophical definition of morality and the theist definition of morality that you're using is that it seems the philosophical definition of morality more corresponds to what most people mean by morality, because we're talking about making the world a better place, whereas you seem to be talking about something completely different. You just seem to be talking about the ability for people to choose to make the world a worse place. And so there seems to be, like, if we compare
the better path, that's what makes
or the word, because you're including they can choose the better path or they can choose the worst path.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's right.
When we compare these two worlds, like the world I've described, where you can do everything in this world except force other people to do things they don't consent to, and a world that you're giving the option to, where you can choose to make it worse or choose to make it better, mm-hmm. The vast majority of people would say, oh, this world where you can't force people to do things they don't consent to is a better world. Now, by better, what they usually mean is more moral. It's a more moral world than the other world. And so this is why I think that the philosophical definition tends to lean in the direction of the non-theistic definition, because by morality, what we want is a better world, not just more people having the option to harm others or not. That doesn't seem to be...
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I appreciate that. I really do, Tom. But I think what you may not realize is that the atheist approach to morality, I think they co-opted or usurped the word morality for its own and created a whole new definition for it. I don't think it's moral. I don't think that there's morality in atheism intellectually.
Well, could you explain that more? What do you mean by...
Yeah. Okay, hang on. There should be no morality in atheism. As I mentioned before in the beginning of this project, this program, I was an atheist. I was a very deep atheist. I was the Dostoevsky type atheist. I was the Voltairean atheist. And I wanted to see what does atheism lead to? And to me, what matters, and because you're talking about morality, what would be a better world? I think we have plenty of history to show us atheism in play. And atheism in play is not a very pretty picture. So I don't, we're fantasizing about these worlds that don't exist, these universes that don't exist, and we have to be dealing with the facts as we've inherited them. Just like in a court case, I'm a lawyer, as I told you, I litigate. We don't invent new facts and say, well, what if this would happen? What if there was, what if O.J. Simpson, had a time transporter machine and was able to go to Florida at the time and then come back, and that's the reason why he wasn't there? Well, no, the facts don't suggest that. So you're talking about very highfalutin ideas of morality that I think have been usurped by the atheist cause. I don't think there is such a thing in atheism intellectually. I think from an intellectually honest point of view, you cannot meaningfully argue that there is morality in atheism. In atheism, there only is what is. There is only what the planet has provided, and that's it. There is no reason for us to be good. There's no reason for us to improve our lives. There's no reason for us to seek a better future 1,000 years from now. I don't see it. Before this program, I asked you whether you had any kids, and God willing, you will have kids one day. I think they're a great joy. But putting you aside for a second, I've asked atheists before who have had children. I said, why do you have children? Why did you have this child? And more often than not, I would say 3 out of 5 times, sometimes they get confused. They ask, I don't know. The answer, I don't know. I just thought it was something I should do. And that to me is a very powerful statement, because they very often don't know why they have kids. They have a very little sense of the future. Look, when I was an atheist, and I know many of our atheist viewers here feel that we are but dirt, and then we will go back to being dirt. And I think that's an intellectually honest answer. There should be no future. There should be no need for civilization. Why do you care about what happens to the planet 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now? What do you care about where your past has been? That is a concern that I have regarding atheism. The theistic view, at least the Judeo-Christian view, as I hold, is one where we feel an obligation to the past and also an obligation to the future. And we say in Hebrew, biyad biyad, which means from hand to hand, generation to generation. There's this connection to the future that I don't see in atheism. And I don't see morality as part of that connection for the future. There is no morality in atheism, and no one has ever shown to me, other than the want that they not be killed because they don't want to kill anybody else, because they don't want to be killed themselves. That's not a good argument for me.
Well, okay, so I think that the problem that you're describing is that you just don't understand it. So atheists...
No, it's not that I don't understand it. I understand it very well.
Well, it's clearly not. So in the way atheists ground morality is the same way you do. You think morality is grounded in the nature of a God. Atheists think morality is grounded in the nature of the universe. So we have equal grounds of morality, meaning, purpose, values. All of those are objective.
Why would the universe care?
The universe doesn't. You don't need care. Value can be there if it doesn't have a mind. You don't need a mind there for it to care. It doesn't.
Who gives that value?
It's not given by a person.
I'll use that phrase. I don't understand why you put that as a value. You said the word value.
Yes.
Value itself is undefinable sometimes, but why would you even have that value? What's the
law of nature?
Why not just live like the animals? Why can't we just be like the lions and the tigers and the bears and the ostriches and just live those lives? Why are we so different as humans? Why do we have these values, as you say?
They have values too. Each value that we have is shared with animals. Their brains have values too.
The values that animals have is to eat, to not be eaten, and to mate. That's it.
That's demonstrably false. So we've proven in evolution and biology that animals have the same emotional values: love, compassion, caring, trust, don't steal, fairness, equality. They have the same values as we do, just to a lesser degree. But it's a different topic. So I mean, that's been proven. I mean,
that's fair.
I can just give you the studies where they test capuchin monkeys and elephants and animals for fairness and stealing and all those kinds of values and love and compassion, trust. This has been demonstrated, but different topic. So value is inherent. So value can be like a law of nature, like gravity, electromagnetism. It doesn't have a choice. There's no feelings in it. You don't need it.
Gravity's not a value, but okay.
No. Value could be a law of nature like gravity. So a thing, a field that permeates the universe, just like you think value is some quality of God's nature. We can think that value is some quality of nature's nature. So one example would be Platonic objects. There is a moral Platonic object in moral Platonism. There's
Mhm.
lots of different ways to ground morality without a God very easily. And that's to answer your question about having kids. I think there is objective meaning, value, purpose, morality with no God, and most philosophers do. It's not really hard to imagine. If these things are possible with a God, then necessarily they're possible without a God, because you're just taking the God, remove the consciousness, and everything that's left over can still be there. So just like you think that there's this God thing, just imagine the God thing with all of its properties, remove the one consciousness property, and you get everything else. It's not terribly hard to get morality out of that. But there were a few things you mentioned I wanted to touch upon. You said atheists are hijacking morality, something along those lines.
Usurping,
Morality predates all religions. Religions are actually hijacking morality from our animalistic evolutionary instincts. That was the studies I mentioned earlier. We know evolution predates all religion, religious ideas. Secondly, the atheist country, like I assume you're mentioning like Hitler and Stalin when you're talking about atheism is bad. Well, if we compare that to today's atheists, most atheistic countries today are the least criminal groups, the least violent groups, the most
like North Korea, like
no,
China.
no, like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland,
They're
Japan.
not atheist
They
countries.
are.
They're
They're
not.
the we
Not.
can look at the
They have, they have
polls.
they have fewer and fewer people who believe that is correct, just like in America. But
Yes.
that does not make them atheist countries, and they are not run as atheist countries. There's a very big difference. I
Okay,
know this
so
well.
so the
Well,
majority of
I have
people.
to demur on that one point because Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, all the North Korean dictators, Mao, and so forth, all those bad boys, every one of them were atheist, and everyone ran their governments as atheistic enterprises, and they sought to destroy God. There's a very big difference between that and a country that has fewer and fewer people that are believers, like Switzerland or Sweden, like you say. That's very different.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference there. The difference being that atheism isn't a policy. Atheism is just the lack of belief. So if atheism actually was harmful, then you would expect in a country with the vast majority of people not believing in a God, that would lead to something harmful. The governments, all of those governments you mentioned are secular governments. They're not run with any religious ideals involved at all. They just don't care about those. The majority of the people are atheists. They don't believe in a God. They don't like. It doesn't matter whether or not they're trying to force God out in the dictatorship sense. Saying that those dictators are representative of atheism is like saying the Crusades is representative of Christianity. Or
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so
So
comparing. One sec. Let me finish. So
yeah.
it's comparing some atheist dictators and saying that that's representative of atheism is poisoning the well. So we know that's a fallacious argument because we can compare if it was true that the atheist as an ideology or whatever was harmful, then you would expect countries with majority atheists today to have the same problem, which is we see the opposite. We see them to be the least violent, the
Yeah.
least harmful. And so by your
No,
own
you're wrong like that. The
one
facts do not bear that
one
out.
second. Let me finish.
Yeah.
So
All right.
by your own standards of comparing harm and destruction, if we look at the most harmful countries throughout time, they've always been religious countries, African religious Christian countries, Chinese countries in the past, Islamic countries. Most harm in the world has been done by religious countries, obviously not at the same as
Right.
fast
Well,
over
now
a
we're
short
coming
time
to the
period.
thesis that I actually was intending to write. I want to say exactly what you just said, and I found that I was wrong 100%. It was completely flipped. I have the facts on that. Read my book about it.
Okay.
I call it, my first chapter, in fact, is called Murder by Numbers, and I disprove what you just said very easily. The next point that you said is about.
Well, go back. See, you just proved that very easily. So can you? What is the number of deaths caused by Christian countries or religious countries through all time compared to atheist countries through all time? Which one's higher?
Okay, so if you were to do through all time, you
Yeah.
have approximately 8 million of Christian countries that you could, very generously, very liberally argue that was on account of Christianity itself. And that's stretching it, by the way. It's even the Crusades, for example, they didn't kill along the way, and most of it was a defensive war, if anything. They didn't kill along the way in the name of Christianity, and it certainly was not the Pope or the Catholic Church telling them to go kill in the name of Jesus or otherwise. So, and I say this as a Jew, whose people were killed by some crusaders as they went along on the road to Jerusalem. That's one thing. And then you have the religious wars, of course, in between. You have the Inquisition, but even the Inquisition was not sanctioned by the church. There were some people and leaders who decided to go willy-nilly about that. By contrast, you compare that to what the socialists and what the Nazis did in the 20th century alone, and you're looking at upwards of 80 million people, and probably 200 million people if you add all the satellite countries as well. So,
well, I asked about all religions.
The torture, the rape, and the other brutalities.
Well, remember, I asked about all religions, not just Christianity. If you add up all religions, you actually get a much different number. Most starvation, most death, most rape, all religious countries. Most of time was mostly religious countries. So most death, most rape. If you add up the total of all religious countries versus all non-religious countries, the religious ones overwhelm the number of deaths.
You're making the same mistake that you're accusing me of, which is that that you said that I was conflating an atheist dictator with atheism itself, and you're conflating these countries that have a religious background to say that therefore every death that occurred under the rule was on account of their religion. It's just a falsity.
Well, secondly, I assume like when you, I want to clarify one second. So when we're referring to Stalin and including the deaths in Stalin, you'd include like the starvation and things caused by him too, correct? Yes. So I mean, I'm including the same statistics in religious countries that cause starvation for similar reasons. Like I'm not literally every death.
Okay, give me an example of a religious country that engaged in that kind of massive starvation as happened in the Ukraine by Stalin.
The Islamic world, when they outlawed math and trading.
I said a Christian country.
What?
A Christian country.
Well, I said all religion. I'm including all religious countries.
I'm not, okay, you might like this, what I'm about to say, which is that I am not making apologies for the Islamic world. All right? The God of Islam is very different than the God of the Judeo-Christian world. And I don't pretend to understand the God of Islam. I don't pretend to defend Islam one way or the other. I certainly do not agree with it whatsoever when it comes to the Islamic terrorism or the beheadings and all the horrific stuff that we see even in present day. So I'm sure we're on the same page on that one. But as far as the Judeo-Christian world, there's nothing that beats atheism. The atheism as a policy. Now, you say there is no such thing as a policy for atheism. You are wrong about that. In fact, atheism is no less of to say that atheism is not an ideology, and I have a whole chapter in my upcoming book about this very point. To say that atheism is not an ideology is like saying not wearing seatbelts is not an ideology, or not believing in vaccines, or not believing in raising your children well, or otherwise. They will have negative consequences if you were to believe in this non-belief, so to speak. Okay.
Well, that's an interesting point, because if that was the case, then we would expect that the countries with majority of people who believe that would have increased rates of crime, but they don't. But I wanted to mention your point there.
No, you're wrong about that. You're wrong about that. Look, you conflate the population on the one hand with the governments. These are very different things. So, for example, many people in Russia were very Christian, but they were taken over by an atheist communist regime, and you couldn't possibly say, well, therefore Christianity created the horrific gulags and the mass murders that we saw in Ukraine and otherwise.
Right, that was socialism, communism.
Yeah,
but
fascism is more or less the same. It's just a slightly different tweak, but that was atheistic as well.
No, so those are political ideologies. They have nothing to do with atheism. But this
atheism was the core. No, you're wrong. Atheism, I know this stuff really well, Tom. Atheism was the core value, to use that word. The core value, the core tenet of fascism in particular, Hitler in particular. He hated Christianity. He called it a feeble mindset. He actually preferred Islam. He wanted to destroy the 10 Commandments. That's why he wanted to go for the Jews first. He wasn't trying to kill the Jews. He was trying to kill the 10 Commandments. He wanted to destroy the notion of God.
Okay, but that's not a value in atheism. So that has nothing to do with atheism. That has to do with Hitler. That's Hitler's personal vendetta.
I agree with you. And I want to make this very clear for your atheist viewers, because they often conflate what I'm saying. When I say atheism as a concept is destructive, I'm not saying that individual atheists are murderers or killers or rapists. I perceive you to be a good man, Tom. I'm sure you are a good man. But the belief that you hold is one that is not something that you would actually want to implement. How about that? It's in the same way that I've heard a good friend of mine says, he's a communist. Well, okay, fine. You can be a communist, but and you can be a good person. It doesn't mean that what he believes is not destructive. It is very destructive.
We keep saying it's destructive. Like when I think about implementing the values of atheism, I think about just basic politics, like just do politics like the American government does politics, separation between church and state. There's no values we're imparting here to anyone. The values are exactly the things that are believed in the majority of mostly non-religious countries. So it seems there's a conflation between what you're saying is the values of atheism are harmful, yet when we look at the atheists who hold these values, they are the least harmful. And then you compare it to like some kind of cherry-picked political ideologies, which are harmful. Like, I'm not a socialist. I don't think socialism or communism or fascism are good ideas. They cause harm in disproportionate amounts in every country, regardless of whether or not you're religious. But trying to conflate that with atheism seems obviously flawed because we know these political ideologies don't work, regardless of whether or not you're religious. And so it has nothing to do with atheism.
And I think it has everything to do with atheism. What these political ideologies, fascism, communism, and aggressive socialism, what they did, all of them have in common is the rejection of God. You can forget about it. You don't even have to call it atheism if you don't like it. But Alexander Solzhenitsyn said it very famously. He said, "We have abandoned God. This is why. That is why all this has happened." And he's right. That he was right.
Because most fascist countries are highly religious. I mean, Hitler was very religious. He was a polytheist.
No, he wasn't. He's a pantheist at best. He spoke about it in a kind of an elliptical way. He was an atheist, my friend.
No, he definitely wasn't. That's like he spent a significant amount of his time.
I can show you quote and verse.
Okay,
it's all in my book.
Okay, so why was he searching for all the different gods' tools?
I mean, I don't mean to joke with you, but you don't. It's obviously not a Raiders of the Lost Ark situation, right? Where he was supposedly looking for God's tools. He wasn't. I mean, that's just a fictional story.
No, it's not.
He wasn't doing it in reality. No, he wasn't.
He really was.
The reason why he was going back to pantheism and even talking about it, generally speaking, he didn't actually want pantheism. What he was doing is he's harking back to it historically for the purpose of saying that we were a better Germany back then, right? That pantheism, during pantheism, we were stronger. And when Christianity arrived on the scene, we became weaker. That's what it was. Nothing more, nothing less. He wanted to get rid of Christianity and wanted to get rid of Judaism. He wanted to get rid, more importantly, the Ten Commandments. That's a fact.
No, it had nothing to do with the Ten Commandments. It had to do with the Jews. He didn't like the Jews.
No, the Jews were the people of the book. And he felt that by killing all the Jews, and he almost succeeded, as you know, he would effectively get rid of the Ten Commandments. That was his crazy mindset. We're talking about a crazy man, right? So
it had nothing to do with the Ten Commandments. Like the whole point of Hitler's.
It had everything to do with the Ten Commandments.
No, it didn't.
Everything.
No.
He said it. He spoke about it repeatedly. Tom, I know this.
Well, I mean, you're just wrong on that topic. Like the whole point of Hitler's bigotry against the Jews was economic, because the damage he thought they caused to the society. It wasn't the Ten Commandments. He didn't care about the commandments. It was the impact they had on society. But it doesn't matter to the point, because
the propaganda that he played with the nation was to say and to use that as a tool to sick the German people against the Jews. Yes, you're right about that. He used economics as a basis for it, but he himself didn't believe that. He hated the Jews because of the accountability that they demanded of the world through the Ten Commandments. You can make those faces, Tom, but it's true.
Okay, that's definitely false. But again, it doesn't matter to the point here. Right. The point here is that you conflating them with atheism is demonstrably false. It's been proven false by every single historian, the entire consensus in every academic field.
Everywhere where atheism has been practiced as a government entity has led to horrific horrors.
America.
Atheism is not a governing philosophy in America.
Yes, it is. It is literally the philosophy that the founders of America used, like Thomas Paine, who was an atheist, who wrote the Declaration of Independence.
You're wrong. Every single founding father said that this great American experiment of ours of democracy will not work unless we all have God in the equation. that is
I
every
think
single
I think
time
you need to read up on your American history, like Thomas
I know
Paine,
my American history
Andrew
book.
Seidel's book that shows the American history that shows it's not based
I
on
know
that.
this stuff,
But
Tom. I
clearly
know.
not. But it's different. It's
Okay.
in. So
All
again,
right.
you have made a historical mistake that's rejected by every single historian.
No, I
that
haven't.
yes,
No,
yes, you have.
keep on saying
So
this.
wait.
What
So
historical mistake have I made?
that you're conflating atheism with these political ideologies. Like the entire academic field everywhere in the world says this is wrong. If you have the opinion that you can have that opinion, it's demonstrably false.
It means nothing to me that you make a general phrase of the entire academic world, which I even that phrase alone is a little highfalutin when you say to say the entire academic world, says that I'm wrong. I don't think you can even point to one person who says that I am wrong about this. Atheism has not led to good things. There's no way you can say that with a straight face.
Well, I can actually. Remember, I collect the polls of the experts to understand the consensus to know what
the experts are your gods then, and you haven't named one.
No,
and that's a problem, because if I were to present this in court, Tom, if we were to argue this as a basis in court, and you would tell the judge, well, a bunch of most of academia believes agrees with me, the court would say so, and I'm saying to you, so I'm talking to you, Tom Jump. You show me where somehow atheism has led to great things.
Atheism, well, that's what most societies today are based off of. But again, in a court of law, wait. Let me answer the questions before you interrupt. So let me answer the questions before you interrupt. So in a court of law, you're allowed to bring expert witnesses. The highest expert is the consensus of experts. That is the highest expert. So bringing in the consensus as a field of evidence.
No, it doesn't matter. You would still have to have their arguments laid out, and to say why you have to demonstrate your.
I already did.
Experience, but
I literally told you these are political ideologies. The damage caused was by the political ideologies, not the atheism. That is the consensus field of every expert on this topic, which I can give you lots of them because I have them saved.
It means nothing to me. Look,
you asked for the reasons. I gave you the reasons, and then you're complaining about the experts.
That's fair enough. Look, every one of these governments that had atheism as a central figure, they got rid of the churches, they got rid of the religions, they banned religion, they banned, even to this day in China, they're now trying to get rid of all Christianity as well. To say nothing what they're doing to the Uyghur Muslims,
which has nothing to do with atheism. That's all political.
Yes, it has everything to do with atheism.
Again, I've proven that false. I've given you the historical examples. I've given you the consensus.
All you've done is point to a so-called vast majority of experts. That's not proof, Tom. You have to prove it with actual facts, and you don't.
Yes. So those, I did that before, where I said, oh, look, here are all the countries with majority atheists who don't do that.
You were wrong about that. The fact that a population has fewer and fewer religious believing people doesn't mean that it's governed by it. Look, you and I, there are a lot of things
that's kind of how democracy works. Yes.
Hold on. No, I agree with you. But look, a lot of countries still deal with things that are echoes of the past, right? We whether we realize it or not, America was really founded on a Judeo-Christian mindset, and it had those values. And we succeeded as a country because of those values. Now, that the fact is that fewer and fewer people are going to church, fewer and fewer people are identifying with any sort of Christianity or Judaism, but they're still enjoying the benefits of a God-centered civilization.
Well, that's actually incorrect. So the theists were actually one sec. So the theists were actually stealing from the secular worldviews. Like all of those values that were built into the Judeo-Christian values came from predating non-religious societies. So none of those are from the Judeo-Christian standpoint.
Give me an example of where there was a testament of any kind that said that here are 10 values that we hold dear.
Who cares about a random number, 10 values? All those values that are enlisted in there predate Christianity and Judaism. And
but they don't, because
yes, they
look,
do.
I mean, murder, just to give you an example, because murder is, the worst kind of crime. I think we both agree to that. But murder was perfectly accepted in the Germanic cults of old. Murder was accepted in the 1940s
and in most Christian societies. But the value "do not murder" predates all religions. Like I can name religions that have "do not murder" before Judaism, like Jainism and Hinduism, and those come from cultures that had murder outlawed before those things with no religions. Like these values.
You say you can name them. I'd like you to name them.
I did. So
No.
Jainism and Hinduism are two religions that predate Judaism that both outlawed murders. And there were many other societies, like Zoroastrianism was the first monotheism, which had these values before Christianity. I don't remember the names of the actual cultures that are not like the locations. The locations had non-religious societies. This was 10 to 50,000 years ago. I don't like, we have the names of the places, but not the names of the actual cultures because it was too long ago. They didn't have religions. They also outlawed murder. This is not a hard thing to understand. It's just
what they did is murder was very much an accepted order of the day. You're wrong about Zoroastrianism. You're wrong about Hinduism. They don't have these long codes like we had in the Bible, whether Ten Commandments or the Torah or a descriptive story like that, in order that we can learn from them. There is not the same sense of one morality that is to be the northern star for all of us. And only with that can we have a true sense of morality. Now, you may not agree with that. You want to say that we can do fine without it, and every country can have its own set of rules in terms of morality. But we have this sense that murder should always be wrong, and I think you're right. I think that we have the sense that theft should always be wrong. I think you're right, but it's just not the way it was until the Ten Commandments. There was a reason why the Ten Commandments were written in the first place, whether you believe it was done by God or written by man. There was a reason why, because there was a sense that you had to write these things down to have a final rule. If it was always that way, you wouldn't need to write it. Just like you wouldn't need to write,
okay.
a law right now that Tom shouldn't take his microphone and beat somebody senseless with it. You don't need to do that because it doesn't. You wouldn't even think about that.
Very difficult with a squishy microphone. So I pulled up the Bhagavad Gita, which was written prior to Judaism, and it says, the Gita permits no distinction between one's relations and others. If one must kill, one should kill one's own people first. Emphasize added, there is no violence. Violence is not permitted. To be against violence. There are lots of these rules in the Bhagavad Gita, proving that both Hinduism and Jainism do have these laws, which do predate Christianity. This is exactly what you were saying. I just proved you wrong. I just literally proved you wrong.
No, those are within all cultures. You might as well say that this Native
that was
American
the point.
tribe. Hold on. Because you don't know where I'm going with this.
Okay.
You might as well say that this Native American tribe, had their rules with them, and they did, and that other Native, but they could kill each other, and they did kill each other. Okay, and different countries and different tribes killed each other all the time. The difference with the Ten Commandments, Tom, was the Ten Commandments were to apply to everybody.
No, what I just read applies to everyone. It's literally is like
no, you just said it, you literally said it. You said that within the own, I forget the exact word, whether it was tribe or community or something like that.
If one must kill, you should kill your own people first.
There you go.
Okay. So the point there was saying that you shouldn't kill other people ever, and if you have to kill someone, killing your own person first. Like it's literally the golden rule: do unto others as you would do unto yourself, except using your people instead of the other people. This is saying don't kill anyone.
I understand what you're saying, but look, Tom, the point is that it's not that the Ten Commandments was. I don't think I said that Judaism and Christianity were the first peoples to ever have any values whatsoever or any rules for that matter whatsoever. I didn't say that. What I am saying is that this is the first time that it's rules that would apply to everybody, to love the stranger as you love yourself. This is very unique.
No, it's not. That comes from. No, it's not.
No. Okay.
So the golden rule predates Christianity and Judaism by many religions. There's lots of examples of that. You can just Google the wiki gives examples of those. But yeah, Jainism, which predates all of them, has rules for complete nonviolence. You're not supposed to kill anything ever. Not flies, not bugs, not people.
Okay, so let's buy your argument. Let's buy it. Okay, so you're talking about different religions then. I mean, these are religions that hearken to some sort of supreme being, whether it's God or otherwise. At the very least, there's a notion of a creator. They don't necessarily, in fact, they don't say, well, you don't have to do it because you shouldn't do it because you shouldn't do it. It doesn't say that. It doesn't hearken to some sort of atheistic, God, or obviously it's not a God, but it doesn't hearken to some sort of atheistic idol.
Like the force, I forget what it's called, the force in Buddhism that predates everything that was before the Buddha. There's no mind
The
to
Tao.
it.
The Tao. You're talking about the Tao.
No, it's not the Tao. There's
That was Chinese.
yeah, it's I forget. There's a specific force, like the Dharma. I think it's the Dharma. The Dharma
Yeah.
is like the force that predates everything that created everything. Even the gods came from the Dharma, and that's
Okay, so
just
there
a
you go.
force of goodness. There's no
It's
no
a,
mind.
regardless, it's a supernatural force. That's what you're talking about. Okay, so everything you've just
With
said.
no mind, so it would be atheistic.
Well, okay, all right. You want to believe that it's atheistic? Be my guest. But if it's supernatural, then it's supernatural, and it has its own mind. And you're saying
Wait,
that
wait,
you
wait. So you
believe
said
that,
two
hold on,
things
hold
there.
on, hold on, hold on. You believe that somehow that this is an atheistic enterprise. I can't. I mean, I can't take that seriously, Tom.
Atheist means no God. Like there's no God. God is a non-physical mind that created the universe, right?
That's correct.
So there can be forces like there are many atheists who believe in the supernatural and ghosts and spirits and stuff. Like you can have that stuff in atheism. You can have a law of nature that is a moral law with no mind.
You see, but it's interesting you say that, and I know you well enough at this point now to know that you probably don't believe in ghosts and
right?
goblins and witches,
Yes.
right? Okay, so I don't understand. I think both of us don't understand how an atheist, one who truly doesn't believe in a god, would still nevertheless believe in goblins and witches and spirits. I believe you that they do, Tom, but I don't understand, and I think you don't understand why they would. If you're just replacing one supernatural force for another. So
I'm confused. Like atheism just means no God. Like you can still believe in anything else. Like there could be supernatural things without a God just fine.
whoa, that's interesting to me because you see, I don't buy that. I think that if you are an atheistic and you're a naturalist, as you say that you yourself are,
Right.
then you should not believe in ghosts and goblins
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
spirits and otherwise. I think it's that when I was an atheist, it was all hocus pocus to me. I think it was all garbage. I said, and I think as probably you say, that science will one day find these answers to the things that we don't know. It's simply a substitute for those things we don't know, God of the gaps and all that stuff. And I felt otherwise, of course. But when I hear that some atheists nevertheless believe in spirits and witches and whatever it might be, supernatural forces, I just think that they're just transplanting one spirituality for another. And I think they're looking for. I mean, maybe the reason why is that they don't want the accountability.
Well, so again, all these things predate any God belief, but I mean, I agree. If we're naturalists, we wouldn't believe in any supernatural thing by definition.
Right.
For naturalism, all there is, then there's no
Because we're on the
supernatural.
same page.
But not all atheists are naturalists. Most philosophers are. Most scientists are.
Apparently, to me, I have heard those people that are atheists and are not necessarily naturalists, like you just mentioned, and I think you're with me on this one. Like that doesn't make intellectual sense to either of us, coming from different directions.
I'm not sure what you mean. It doesn't make intellectual sense. Like, there's no logical contradiction with saying that there could be other things without a God. Like there could be ghosts or spirits. You can have a soul without a God. You can have an afterlife without a God. I don't like all of the things that you think God does can be done without a God. Like I don't.
Well, okay. Now I'd like to ask you about this. Now, so you say that there can be a soul without a God.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Please explain to me why you think that, because that is fascinating to me.
Oh, because there could be a supernatural realm and you can have souls in people and they could just be a part of the universe. They could be a part of a field like the Dharma field. They could be like the reincarnation thingy in Hinduism where there's just this soul field thingy out there. Like,
well, this is very strange to me because you, on the one hand, reject God utterly.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you say there could be a soul, there could be this, there could be that.
There could be a God too. So I wouldn't say it's probably not.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So it sounds like you're more agnostic than you're an atheist.
No, because knowledge doesn't require certainty. You don't need 100% knowledge or 100% certainty to say there isn't something. So I can say there is no Santa, even though it's possible there's a Santa. I can still say, yeah, there's no Santa.
That's very fair. Look, I think you'll like what I'm about to say, which is that I feel with great confidence that there is a creator. I believe, and with less confidence, but I still believe that that creator is the same as the God of the Bible, for different reasons altogether. And I think that many people, when they tackle the subject of God, they seek they run right away to kind of proving why Jesus walked on water. As you know, I'm not a Christian, so I don't believe in the New Testament. But I think you got to tackle first, and I say this more to my theist friends, to my God-fearing friends, that if you're going to talk with an atheist, to somebody as intellectual as Tom here is, first talk about the notion of whether there's a creator in the first place. And that's what I like about our discussion, Tom, very much, is that it is about the creator. And I want to thank you, and I want to say this is a very intellectually honest discussion, because almost, I would say 90% of the atheists that I talk with, the first thing they do is they complain about the Red Sea opening. How could you believe in that crap? Adam and Eve. Does that mean there's only 2 boys born out of that? How could that create civilization and so forth, right? And the legitimate discussions, but the first thing we need to tackle is whether or not there's a creator at all. And this is where this discussion has been going. And I want to say that's a rare thing, and it makes it much more engaging as a result.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that debating over the Bible is kind of, I don't enjoy debating over just facts in the Bible, because you can interpret it in many different ways. It could be allegorical. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Christian God is there. There could be a God that was like deistic or whatever. He could still have created stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm more interested in the general position. Is there any reason to believe there is any kind of a God, versus just like, I think a quantum field is the best explanation for the origin of the universe. And so I prefer going for more the general God concepts, rather than just specifically making fun of, a talking snake, ha ha ha.
Right, exactly. Okay, good. I'm so glad about that. Yeah, for me, for the people that, a lot of my atheist friends, and I'm not necessarily saying this about you, Tom, but a lot of my atheist friends, it's not that they don't believe in God, it's they don't want to believe in God. 2 different things. And I think they don't want to believe in God, and they do believe in other things.
I hope so.
Supernatural or otherwise.
They believe in nothing. They literally believe nothing.
Right. But I think that they don't want it because as soon as you do accept that there's a creator, and if you do believe that that creator is the same as the God of the Bible, then it means something. It means that, wait a minute, what does this creator want from me? Am I responsible? Am I have to do some things that are necessarily good? Do I act willy-nilly in terms of sex and relationships? Do I act willy-nilly regarding my fellow man? Or am I responsible for them? And I think this is what I love about the Bible. So I love about the notion of creation. But I think a lot of people don't want to believe in God because of that accountability issue. And that's what I've kind of determined as I've talked to many atheists about this. Not you, Tom. I think you're a very different animal. And I say that as a compliment. But many atheist friends, they're very dismissive. As soon as I talk about, if I want to bring up the subject of evolution versus a creation, not the creationism, I'm talking about a creator of the universe, they don't want to talk anymore. They'll just stop talking. And I'll try to present to them probabilities. You know about all this stuff, Tom. I'll talk to them about the likelihood of and the fine-tuning arguments that have been made, the fact that the Cambrian explosion and otherwise, but I can't even get there. Can't even start talking about it as I could with you, because they'll just shoot it down. And when they shoot it down, that means to me that they don't want the possibility of entertaining it. Because once they entertain it, it might mean that they have to be accountable in various realms of life.
That's something I've never really understood. Like I've said before, what if people ask me, like, what if there was proof, or because they ask, what would count as evidence for God? Well, I say novel testable predictions. And they ask, well, if you provided novel testable predictions, would you believe in God? I'm like, yeah, that would be evidence. And then would you worship him? Like, no, he mass murdered babies. Of course, I'm not going to worship him. And so for me, I wouldn't have any problem saying, yeah, God exists, but I'm not obligated to listen to him. Like, he's immoral. He killed a bunch of people. So for me, it's always been
Right.
confusing that the argument religious people make that, oh, you don't want to believe because you're going to be obligated to obey him. Like, no, I can grant he exists and still not obey him. I still think he's evil and
Oh
immoral.
yeah, no, I think that's an intellectually honest position to take. I really do. I think you're wrong about that he's murdered all these people and stuff like that. If you're talking about the Canaanites, I mean, I talk about that at length in my recent book as well.
I need to start with like the global flood thing.
Yeah, the global flood too. I mean, people don't realize that, when it's kind of you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? When people say, how could God have allowed a Hitler to happen, right? Because God didn't, at least somebody's arguing that God actually made the concentration camps and actually put the 6 million plus other people into the ovens. They're saying, how could God let Hitler happen? But if God smote all the Nazis and just killed them all, right? We'd have no problem today with God having done that. But 1,000 years from now, if the biblical verse were to say, and then God smote all these people called the Nazis, we wouldn't we would say, oh my gosh, this is terrible what God has done. He's killed all these people. I mean, what did they do? So the Canaanites were pretty savage people, and so was life on earth before the flood. It was a pretty horrific, at least if you were to believe the stories as told by the Bible. It was pretty horrific, and these people were engaging in child sacrifice and many other kinds of sacrifice, and just the beheadings and everything else. Um, it's ISIS on steroids, let's put it that way. And it was going on for 400 years. And had God not done anything, we would say correctly, how could God have let these monsters continue to live on the planet? So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Well, I would disagree there. I'd say even if he killed all the Nazis, I'd still say that would be immoral for a god. So like,
Ah.
um,
Well, we disagree about that for sure.
yeah. So let me give you my argument and let me hear what you think. So,
All
like,
right.
if a doctor in the 1800s cut your leg off, you get shot in the leg, the doctor cuts your leg off. Like, he's being a good doctor because he's doing the best he can to save your life. Because if you get an infection and you're shot in the 1800s, there's nothing they can do. They don't have antibiotics. You're going to die. So the
Right.
best he can do is cut your leg off. But if a doctor today cut your leg off, that doctor would be sued for malpractice like instantly because he can just give you
Right.
an antibacterial shot. And
Correct.
so, if you have greater technological capabilities and you choose to use a method that would cause more harm than is necessary to save the people or whatever, then you'd be sued for malpractice. That would be evil. You would be immoral to cause more harm than necessary to solve a
Correct.
problem.
Right.
So, God, instead of drowning everyone or destroying Sodom and Gomorrah or forcing Jehoshaphat to sacrifice his daughter because he won a battle. And I don't think she did anything wrong, or killing the kids with the bears because they made fun of a bald guy. I don't really think they did anything wrong. Instead of doing that, what he could have done would be something like just create the force field thing, make it impossible for them to kill like other people. Just add that extra law of physics. So just like they can't fly, you can't kill babies. Oh no, your free will is
Okay.
destroyed.
Well, I mean, look, it's wishful thinking. I mean, as they famously say, or we say in Jewish culture, if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a car. We just can't do it. I mean, it's not
Well,
reality.
God could
You
have,
want
couldn't
that
he?
force field. What's that?
Well, God could have. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying God could have
I
done it this
understand.
way.
But you're quibbling with the powers of God, and that's okay. But I think that going back to the very beginning of the discussion, that the existence of free will, as I see it at least, is evidence of God. It's one of the great reasons why I do believe in God. And on the contrary, if I felt
Well, isn't that a
that
different
there was no
topic?
free will, what's that?
Well, I think that's a different topic because the argument I'm making here is that God deliberately chose to kill people, like killing the 40 kids with the 4 mother bears. God killed them when he could have chosen a less murderous option. So here I'm
Okay,
not
so
talking
no,
about free
okay,
will.
that's a look. I don't know to what you're alluding on that, so I'll admit my ignorance on that on the Bears. But I can tell you about these, Sodom and Gomorrah. As you know, the God gave a chance. Abraham was to provide so many good men, and if he could show so many good men, and I think it boiled down to 5 or so. If he could show that, then he would spare Sodom and Gomorrah. He did not. He was not able to do so, and then the result was the result. So we want God to get rid of evil. I mean, if we didn't have that, if God continued to let the Canaanites do the horrific uh, killings and rapes and things that they did to children for hundreds and hundreds of years like that, and did nothing, we would say, this is not the kind of God that I want to believe in. I want to believe in a God that vanquishes evil and sometimes steps in during the age of miracles, as it were. So,
All right, I
here we
totally
are,
agree.
however, quibbling a little bit about the Old Testament in a way that we said we wouldn't, but I'm happy to talk about that too.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think that we would want God to step in to stop the evil, but what I'm saying is that the way in which he did step in to stop the evil was in itself immoral. Like he could have done it in a more moral way. So the bears thing is 2 Kings 2:24, where the bears made fun of a bald guy, and God's no,
Oh,
the
okay.
kids make fun of the 42 kids made fun of a bald guy, and then God sent like 4 mother bears to go maul them all or something. Um,
Yeah. As you know, there's usually a lot more nuance to these things, not just the Torah, but also the Talmud and the 613 mitzvot and otherwise. So it's usually way beyond the interpretation that's first given. For example, an eye for an eye. You've heard that expression,
yep.
and people think that's so barbaric. It's actually an eye for an eye, a tooth for another tooth. It's never been that the punishment has been, well, you lost your eye, therefore you get to gouge out the other guy's eye. It doesn't work that way. The eye for an eye, tooth for the tooth, the whole reason why they have that phrase is to show that the punishment should fit the crime. That's all it means. So you should not punish somebody who knocked out your tooth by killing him, for example, or gouging out his eye for that matter. That's what it's about. And it doesn't satisfy you. It doesn't compensate you, by the way, when you gouge somebody else's eye out. What does compensate you is money or some sort of flock, herd or something like that. Look, I'm going to have to go, but I do want to leave with a very fun story, and one that I think both of us can resonate to, because I really have enjoyed debating with you, and it's really an honor to be on the show.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate you coming on. It was a great conversation so
bet.
far.
So there was and maybe you heard this cute joke, but there's a story of a man he's at a parking area. It's very dark at night, and there's only one lamppost, and he's looking for something. And another man sees him, and he says, "Oh, are you looking for something?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm looking for my car keys. I left it near my car." And the second man says, "Well, wait a minute. I don't see any car here. What's going on? Where's your car?" And he says, "Oh, it's about 2 blocks away." And the second man says, "Well, shouldn't you be looking for your car keys near the car?" And he goes, "Yeah, but this is where the light is." Okay. So, it's in many ways, both you and I are wondering, which one of us is the one looking only where we think the light is, right? So maybe it's me, maybe it's you. Each of us has this ability to kind of use logic and reason and such, but we have to sometimes think about to go beyond where the light appears to be, where the obvious answers are. Sometimes we got to push ourselves and do the hard work to go somewhere else. And Tom, I think you genuinely think that you're doing that, and I genuinely think that I'm doing that. But I will say it's been a real pleasure, and one of the better debates I've had with an atheist in many years.
Yeah, absolutely. Regan, appreciate you taking the time to come on and have a conversation. It was a lot of fun. Would you like to tell people where they can find you and about your YouTube channel before you head out?
Oh, sure, that'd be great. Yeah, you can find me on the Barak Lurie YouTube channel. That's probably the easiest way to go.
Isn't it like the Barak Lurie Show? Isn't that's the name?
Yes, it is the Barak Lurie Show. Exactly right. So just YouTube, or search in YouTube Barak Lurie Show, and you'll find it that way. So thanks very much, Tom. I do appreciate that.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Talk to you later.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. God bless.